Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. Dennis Schraderfield with Kasper Ozolowski on the 20th of November, fresh from our trip down the UFC 205 in New York City. We were living in Harlem, and we made it back here to Melbourne. What a great experience that was, Cass.
Oh, man, great times. I think the best thing of the trip was eating some fried chicken and waffles and other soul food in Harlem. No, I'm just kidding. It was UFC 205. It was an amazing trip. The jet lag is worn off, and the boys are back in your ears. And we've got, wait for it, sexy guests this week. Luke Rockhold. I mean, we're talking about UFC Melbourne. That's next week. Luke Rockhold is on the show. There's a lot of things to ask him. Cris Cyborg. Nobody has heard from Cris Cyborg in a while other than on the Twitter universe. So she's going to be on the show to do a proper interview. A lot of stuff to talk to her about. And then Stephen Wonderboy Thompson coming off an absolute classic. Him and Tyron Woodley tore the house down. We can tell you, we were there live. And Stephen Thompson's going to be on the program to talk about that and a whole bunch of other things. But we've got things to break down and other things to talk about, don't we, Dennis?
Yeah, Damon Martin, a Submission Radio friend, even though he stood us up at the bar in New York, but that's
Bastard.
okay. We've forgiven him. Or have we? He's going to be on the program later on talking about all things MMA. We're going to be breaking down some of the key fights from UFC Belfast and UFC Sao Paulo. Also, Kasper has some takeaways from UFC 205. So, Kasper, can't wait to hear what you're going to bring up because there is a couple of things to talk about. And Fedor signs with Bellator. Say, what? Multi-fight deal. He'll be fighting Matt Mitrione. We'll be giving you our thoughts and talking about all that. So that's going to be a lot of fun stuff to talk about later on in the episode.
Oh, yes. The order is Rockhold, Cyborg, Wonderboy, and then Damon Martin, bringing it on home with a whole bunch of goodness. Before we cut to our first interviews, just want to say to you guys, thank you so much for all the positive and any feedback in general on the Submission Radio Lounge video and all the stuff on our channel and our coverage of UFC 205. And, of course, the lovely feedback that we've been getting on the episodes in general on iTunes. Just a reminder, if you do feel like it, if you can be bothered, feel free to jump on, give us a review on iTunes. You don't even need to write a review. If you give us however many stars you think we deserve, that's pretty much all we need, because it bumps up the show and iTunes looks at it and says, hey, this is a good show, we're going to help promote it. And because you guys have been working hard on these reviews, we figured we'd read some of them out. Young Murph 1992 from the US, he says, amazing podcast, great guest, bam, 5-star review. Underground Robin Hood from the UK, a fantastic UFC-themed podcast, consistently getting the best guests in the world of UFC. 5 stars, bam. I love this one. This is probably my favorite one. Lawyer Gamer from Canada. Love the Canadians. He writes, it's a sexy show with sexy guests and sexy hosts and sexy fans. MMA in Australian accent is awesome. Well, he's right about the sexy fans. Bleganor from the US. Very exciting. Tons of great guests. Lots of hype. MMA fans, best friend. And to be honest, there is a bunch of others. I'm not going to read them all out. But if you guys give us a review, we will read it out. So there you go.
Yeah, that's right. Jump on, give us a review. We'll read them from time to time. And thank you so much for those reviews, guys. Yeah, sexy fans. I mean, we should release a T-shirt, just sexy fans on the front and Submission Radio on the back. I think that may sell a couple. Let us know if you guys think it will. But otherwise, make sure to follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. You can send us a message on Twitter. We don't discriminate. We don't have to follow you back for you to send us a message, and you can message us on Facebook as well. We love chatting to the fans. But Kasper, you mentioned UFC Melbourne. Next week, we won't be doing a proper show because we will be doing UFC Melbourne. Everybody can check out our coverage on our YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe. But in keeping with the UFC Melbourne theme, we have a guy that was supposed to be headlining the event. He's on the line, and Cass, I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, our next guest is a former UFC middleweight champion, a former Strikeforce middleweight champion, and he was slated to make his return to Submission Radio at UFC Melbourne next week. A friend of the program, it is a pleasure to welcome Luke Rockhold back to the program. Luke, how's it going?
It's going well, guys. Just trying to get on the recovery train.
Yeah, the recovery train can be an annoying train. I'll tell you what's another annoying train. It felt like we were close to getting that dinner reservation for you at Attica. Luke, how disappointed are you that not only are you not going to be fighting at UFC Melbourne, but no dinner in Attica next weekend?
That is the worst part about the whole situation. The funny thing is I obviously I got injured and I had to pull out from the fight. And no kidding, like it was they had no openings or something like that. And then sure enough, the week after, I made it official, they emailed me back saying that, they have an opening that just opened up.
Oh my!
I'm thinking about flying out just for my reservation.
I mean, that makes sense, right? You gotta honor the reservation. They've got beautiful food with little flowers on there. Give us the update on the injury, though. I mean, we saw you were in New York last weekend. How's the knee going? How's the recovery train? When do you think you'll be back in the octagon?
Well, I got I've had quite a few assessments of the knee from different doctors, and they, a small bundle is pulled off the ACL at the attachment point. So I'm trying to go through the natural process of healing, which they say there's a high potential of it reconnecting itself. And so I've done 2 series of PRP shots. I'll probably do a third, and I might do some stem cells again. I'm trying to do everything I can to avoid surgery. That's key for me, because the ACL, anytime you go into the ACL or orthoscopic or reconstruction, it's a good 12 months, a year out pretty much from everything. So I'm told potentially in a couple months it could reattach itself, and then I could start kicking again. It's weird because it feels good in so many ways, but the moment I kick, feels like my knee's going to fall apart if I'm kicking at full power. So I'm just trying to lay off that, not trying to aggravate it and heal up.
That must be super annoying, because we know you're a tough dude, and a part of you would have thought about fighting with the injury anyway. I mean, how close did you get to just ignoring everybody's advice and just going through with a fight with that injured knee? And how exactly did you injure it?
I did. I tried to work around it for a week or so, and then I knew it was time to test it. I tried to working around it, and if the kick didn't land flush, it would really felt like my knee was going to fall apart. And so I know I need to show up. This is not a time to go out there and have a half-assed performance. And Jacare he's no slouch. So I know I needed my left kick my last time out with Jacare, and I know I need it this time. It's my biggest weapon, and not being able to kick is something I kind of dealt with last time. I tried to avoid kicking, and it's certain things you can't work around leading into a fight. I'm definitely one who fought with a lot of injuries, but this is something I couldn't fuck with.
Wow.
I'm gonna get healed up and do what I have to do, work my way back, and just take my time with this. Forgot the second part of the question.
How did you injure it? How did it happen?
How did it happen? I couldn't exactly tell you. I think it was just wear and tear. I just noticed my knee. Like every time I would throw an inside leg kick and it would get checked, there would be, I'd kind of question the stability of my knee. I don't know what was going on. I tried to shake it off, and then one time I really kicked hard, and it was slightly checked, and then it felt loose, and then it swelled up the next couple of days, and I just started then I tried to work around it. Then I did one more time, and then I realized I couldn't go forward.
Wow. Are you still interested in fighting Jacare, or will you be looking at sort of a new opponent, maybe the winner of, say, Rashad Evans and Tim Kennedy, or do you think Jacare is still sort of the quickest path to victory and the best path for you?
I mean, given the timetable of what's going on with my potential recovery, and Bisping and Yoel Romero fighting probably not till, February, March. I think that's a good time frame. If I can get in that frame in the March era, that would be perfect for me. Jacare he's the most clear-cut way back to the title. I'm not looking to fight another guy and then have a question mark who gets the next shot. I'm going to go straight down the throat. I'm going to get Jacare, finish my business with Jacare, and make no ifs, ands, or buts who's the next in line. Get that shot, whether it's Bisping or Yoel.
UFC 205 was a pretty crazy event. We were all there, and we saw you were there ringside. So we want to ask you a quick couple of questions, because we know you're in a bit of a rush to go to catch a show. What did you think about Romero beating Weidman in that devastating fashion and getting Bisping next? Do you think he deserves the next title shot?
I mean, he's had some decent performances, and Yoel is always dangerous. You can't force and can't rush a fight with Yoel. I knew that, and that's why I wanted to fight him in a 5-round fight. Weidman started forcing the issue in the 3rd round, knowing he was potentially, it was a 1-1 scenario, and he paid for it. Yoel's a very explosive guy, and he kept baiting in for that flying knee. He actually was going in for the takedown. So obviously, I think Yoel started timing in. This corner must have called for it or something. But that was a pretty brutal shot. But it was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, even though you and Weidman have sort of had a bit of a rivalry, did you feel a little bit bad for him losing in such brutal fashion in his hometown of all places?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to obviously sit back. And, I don't mind Weidman that much. He's a nice guy. He's a harmless individual, really. He's, for him to take 2 losses in that fashion, it's pretty tough to see, for anyone. I don't wish no harm on the guy. But the campaigning for that fight in New York, that as long as he did and put it on the line, to lose in that fashion must be tough.
What are you thinking about this title fight between Romero and Bisping? Do you think Romero beats Bisping pretty handily here, or do you think there's a chance Bisping can hold on to his title against him?
I think it's a rare opportunity for Bisping to pull it off. About as rare as he has beaten me. I think Yoel pretty much goes in there, and it might take a little while, but he'll get to Bisping. Sure enough, I believe. Bisping's a tough individual. He's going to go in there, and he's more technical striker, and Yoel's pretty raw. But I think with the takedown opportunities that he could start throwing Bisping around, it would start changing the pace of the fight.
It's going to be an interesting fight. Another big moment at UFC 205, and something that you'll remember, Khabib's victory over Michael Johnson. Of course, Khabib Nurmagoedov is your teammate and friend. Do you believe he deserves the next title shot? And do you think the UFC would actually make a fight between him and McGregor?
I think there's no if. I mean, it's obvious he deserves the title shot. The kid, I mean, what is he now? 24-0, 25-0. It's ridiculous what he's done and everything. And all respect to McGregor. The guy is legendary. His left hand is just second to none, and his ability is pretty much not in question. Performances, but to say that he is not active enough is it's not fair. It's not fair to Khabib. It's not fair to the MMA world. You need to fight the best guy, and Khabib has proven himself over and over again. He's the one. If you're going to go out there and you got to do it, the UFC can't make McGregor do anything. It's going to be McGregor's choice. So he's got to accept that and make that fight. The war of the world's kind of thing go down. Brazil. I mean. The Irish versus the Russians. He built it up quite well.
Yeah.
He built it up quite well. I'm not gonna lie. Kid's getting well with his mouth.
Yeah. He was talking to Dana in between rounds, and then he was telling us all that stuff in the back in the media room as well. We were all just thinking it was great. I mean, Michael Johnson had some success on the feet early in the fight, but once it hit the ground, it was all Khabib. And I mean, he had techniques that a lot of people haven't even seen before. Who do you think wins in a fight between him and McGregor if it ever did happen?
McGregor's dangerous. Khabib can't stay on the feet like he did with Johnson.
Right, yeah.
McGregor will put... I've never seen a left hand like that. He can just touch his guys and they wobble. So Khabib is unlike anybody else I've ever grappled with. A 55-pound man that can grapple with me and give me competition. I don't see that. I haven't seen that anywhere, and I know what it's going to be like. If Khabib gets a hold of anybody, it's over. And it's that one shot. It's that striker versus grappler game. If Khabib gets a hold of McGregor, I don't think he's going to last at all. And but the same thing, McGregor, you can't give him that opportunity on the feet. So we'll see. We'll see if the fight takes place. They seemingly are trying to work their way around it, but I think it's a fight that should happen.
Well, you mentioned that they're trying to work their way around it. I think majority of people look at Khabib's record, what he's done, and the way he sold his fight, and say that's the clear-cut #1 contender. But McGregor, being the businessman, he's also angling for a welterweight fight potentially against Tyron Woodley. I mean, what do you think about that situation?
I think it's an intriguing matchup, no doubt. We'll see. What comes. How they make that. I think he's still dangerous. He's dangerous to that division too. I mean, anybody can strike that well. seems like his power can translate over divisions pretty well. So I think Tyron's not the biggest guy, at 170, but obviously he's proven to have some trouble in the striking realm with a guy like Wonderboy. So McGregor's going to be in that same realm.
Let's quickly talk about a fight that just happened recently. Gegard Mousasi beat Uriah Hall, sort of scratched that fight off his record. He was on Extra Rounds podcast in the last episode talking about how he wants to fight you next. Do you have any interest in a fight with Mousasi if your knee's healthy and he's ready to go? Or is he someone that you're not really considering because maybe it's not really the quickest path to the next title shot if you do fight him?
Yeah, if I have a guaranteed title shot and I fight Mousasi, sure, why not? I'd love to. I'm not looking to fight the next guy, fight Mousasi, and then have Jacare, try to jump me for that shot. I didn't see his fight. I didn't get to see how it went and what he looked like, but he looked decent. A lot of respect for him. A lot of respect for Mousasi, but I want to get right back at it. I want my title shot.
All right, Luke. Well, we appreciate your time. We got 2 more questions, and then we're straight out of your hair. Before I let you go, just wanted to find out your thoughts on our own Robert Whittaker, who's now headlining UFC Melbourne just next week. Do you believe he can beat Derek Brunson? And if so, where does a win like that put him in the rankings and in the middleweight division? What do you think?
I think he definitely can beat Brunson. I think it's a good matchup on both ways. I think Brunson's very dangerous. We'll see who's the next, guy that potentially jump into the next, within that realm of the top 5 guys that we have. So, I like a new prospects. They're both solid prospects, and we'll see what comes of it. I don't know. I'm curious to see what kind of a fight it is. If Brunson tries to stand with more, I think he tries to expose the wrestling and put that full arsenal on him, which I don't believe Whittaker's really faced yet. A guy that can wrestle that good and can strike too. So this is the next level for both.
Yeah, it's going to be an intriguing matchup, and we can't wait. It happens next week. And you're right, new blood in your division would be exciting. Before we let you go, Luke, you're on the shelf for now. You're fixing your knee. You're on that recovery train. But in the meantime, what's the message? What's the message to the fans, to the UFC, to everybody who's anticipating a Luke Rockhold return?
The message is I'm just trying to get healthy. But you'll know. I'll make my statement when I come back. Whoever I fight, whenever it is, I'll prove that I'm not going nowhere, and I'll be right back. I'll be right back in the mix. I'll be there to claim my title. Doesn't matter who's standing above.
Well, there you guys go. Luke Rockhold, he's on the healing train at the moment, but we can't wait to see him return. Make sure to follow Luke on Twitter at Luke Rockhold. Luke, thanks so much for being on the program. Quickly, what's planned for the holiday season? Christmas is coming up. New Year's is coming up. We know you're a busy man, a man about town. You got some big plans set up?
Not get too fat.
Well, how's this? In the meantime, do you have any modeling gigs? Any covers? We saw you're on the Australian edition of Men's Health. Any other covers you got planned?
I got some other. We're in talks with some big companies about making some moves. We'll see. Nothing's finalized yet, but we got some things in the works, no doubt.
All right, well, there you go, guys. Don't forget to check it out at Luke Rockhold and stay on the updates. Luke, again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Always love having you on the program.
Okay, enjoy. Have fun next week.
Hi, this is Connor Nelson, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Returning to the program is one of, if not the most dominant forces in women's MMA and the 145-pound division. She is the current Invicta FC featherweight champion. Return to the show, Cris Cyborg. Cris, welcome back to the program. How's it going?
Good. Thank you. I appreciate it again, being show again and say a little bit about my last victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we get to that victory, we've noticed you've been traveling around the world doing seminars. Tell us, how was your time in Thailand and Canada?
After my fight, I have scheduled in Thailand, and not just for seminar. We did a women's camp in Phuket Top Chin, and after we vacation a lot of fun trip for relax a little bit. And I went to Canada, one university, and we teach there over there. And, more fun time than the teach. Now I'm in the United States again. I start training again for see who next.
Yeah, you travel to Thailand quite often. What exactly is it about that place that keeps bringing you back? And are you surprised more fighters don't go over to Thailand to work on their Muay Thai in their time off?
I really like Thailand, and then the last time I stayed over there like 3 months. I go have fun, but I keep training. I learn new things about clinch, new things about Muay Thai. Always you have to keep training because you learn new things there. I really like all the coaches being the Phuket top team, and always I go over there and stay there. People really cool with me, and yeah, I like to go over there and learn more, a little bit more Muay Thai.
Well, there's a lot to talk to you about, Cris. So we want to talk to you to begin with about last weekend's amazing UFC 205 card, where everyone was surprised to see Miesha Tate announce her retirement from MMA. I just want to get your thoughts. What did you think when you saw she was leaving the sport?
I don't think she's going to retire. I think she just in the time she lost the fight, I think she felt like emotion. And I think the second fight in the row she lost, and I think the last fight her, this one, other one, I think she was short time, and I think she needs a break, like a break. I think she's now mentally good in this fight, and I think she's just getting emotional and say wants to retire. I don't think she's going to retire. She's a young girl. She did a lot of things for the sport. I really think she just get emotional after the fight.
When you sort of saw that she was potentially retiring, it sounds like you don't buy it, but for a moment there, were you a little bit disappointed? Because it's a fight that a lot of people have been talking about for a while now, and one of the more realistic possibilities. Is that something that you sort of hope will happen in the future, you versus Miesha Tate?
I never chose my opponent. I always, ready for fight, but I really. After my last fight, I even have hard cuts for 140. I really don't think I'm going to cut again for 140 too soon. And I really will look for stay in my division 145. But, I never choose my opponent. I'm open for two super fights. But let's see if it'll be good for me, of course.
You say that you probably won't be cutting to 140 anytime soon and you're going to stay at 145. Would that be in Invicta, or would you be fighting at 145 in the UFC?
We start talking. My manager talked to have a meet with UFC, and soon you'll have news. I really don't know, but I just know my next fight will be 145. I really don't know if it'll be Invicta UFC. I just wait for see what's going on.
Well, you tweeted out recently, Ronda won't fight me. Miesha is retired. Holly Holm was world boxing champion 155. Time to bring in 145 pound fighters. I'm just curious because it looks like there's not really anyone that makes sense for you to fight at 140. Does this sort of mean you're not going to take another fight at 140 with a no-name opponent? It has to be someone huge for you to fight at 140 again.
The first time I made a 140 in Brazil, in Curitiba. The first thing I did it because it will be in my city, and then second thing, FC Brazil. The main thing is to open the opportunity, maybe super fight with Rondaldo 140. And then because I just showed them, man, I can make 140 for super fight. And my second fight supposed to be 145. I was supposed to defend my belt. And then again, I have the opportunity to fight 140 in Brazil. And man, I really would like to fight. I respect all my opponents, but the girl, my last fight, nobody knows her. And she's having like 70 Muay Thai fights. She's really, really good opponent. But, for me, sacrifice, make 140, I would like to super fight, fans would like watch. Because my last opponent, she's her last fight, last to win, it's 145 pounds. And then sometimes I don't see, I don't see if worth make 140 for make fight like this. If you want to be super fight, doesn't matter if the weight can be 150, can be 155, 145, but I think I can only need to kill myself at the time for me 140 for normal fight.
So at this point, are you saying that the only time we'll probably see you at 140 is if Ronda Rousey does the super fight with you? Otherwise, you'll be fighting at 145 from now on?
Yes.
Wow, this is exciting times. I mean, this is what a lot of people, fans, media, critics, everybody have been basically asking for. Just curious, people have suggested that, because we don't really know what's going to happen with this Ronda Rousey fight, we'll talk about that in a moment, but people have said in the meantime, why doesn't the UFC just bring in the Invicta fighters and have you defend your title on UFC shows? Have you tried speaking to Dana White or Sean Shelby or anyone in the UFC about it, and what was the response?
I was tell the idea, have girls 145, just have to open the opportunity, for sure, have like two events, have 145 pounds, Bellator, Invicta, and have other events now open. It's a road series, I think maybe 154 or maybe 155. Then just sign the Olympic girls from judo, have girls. If you open opportunity, have girls. You cannot say excuse, don't have girls. And then, about Ronda, her next fight, man, I don't know how many people are going to watch. I don't think it's going to break like 1 million pay-per-view. I really don't know. My last fight, I did like 1.3. People like watching. It doesn't matter if you be 145, if you be 135, if you be 140. People like watching my fight. And I think if you make it the 145 division, for sure, then make 135-pound division with 10 girls. If you find 10 girls, 145, you can make the division. It's not be too hard. Just, you have to do this. You have to want.
What do you think when you hear them say that over and over? Oh, there's not enough 145 fighters in the world to make a division. Does it frustrate you? Because you just made a good point that it's easily done if you can figure out a way to bring in a few girls.
Yeah, frustrate me, and for sure frustrate the other girls too, because look like they don't respect the other girls 145. In Bellator, have two girls now, Julia Budd and Marius Puna gonna fight for the belt. Bellator, of course, I have 145. If they're gonna fight for the belt, for sure have other girls behind this. And I feel when I hear this, I feel very disrespectful because I have a lot of girls 145. No, it's not just it. I have to give support for all the girls. Not just it. 135. I don't have nothing against 135, but you can open 155, 145, 115, 125. Same the guys. The guys have all divisions. Why cannot have the same for the women? And if you see the boxer girls, the number one girls in the boxing, all it's bigger than 135. Lila Lee, have the Lucia, Clarissa Shields too. She's the number one now, and she's having me. Clarissa Shields, we change it, we talk, and maybe she said, maybe we can train together. And she's heavier than me. Have a lot of girls. Just have to open the door and give you opportunities for that. Maybe the boxing girls want to go to MMA, but they don't see the division. Then they cannot change it. They cannot have the opportunity.
If they do say, bring in a 145-pound division, of course, that division in a lot of ways would be built around you and revolve around you. Just wondering, Cris, because you've spoken to us before on the show about, wrapping up soon and starting a family, you want to have children. How much longer do you think you would sort of stick around for the UFC to potentially, build a division around you?
I not just thinking about the UFC, the open division. My career, I really healthy. I don't have bad injuries. And, for me, I think more 3 years, 4 years, I don't know, I'm going to keep fighting. But this is depending, and it doesn't matter if UFC don't open my division. For sure, I'm going to fight in other events because all my fans follow me where I'm going. And I love my job, and I'm looking for 4 years. I really don't know. I feel my body I can be forever, But of course, I would like to have a kid too. But I don't feel I want to retire soon. I feel motivated every day, train every day, and it's more important when people appreciate your work, motivate you more for keep going. And yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation that's going on right now. I mean, look, you mentioned the super fight with Ronda Rousey, so I just want to quickly ask you, were you disappointed when you saw that Ronda was taking this fight at UFC 207 rather than doing the super fight with you? Because she spoke on Ellen how this might be one of her last fights, so it doesn't look very likely that you two will ever fight.
You know, Ronda fought after her lose for Holly Holm, and she took like 1 year break. And then, you know, I don't think it's fair she's fight for the belt after 1 year in break. I think she's supposed, or she's rematch Holly Holm, or fight somebody else, you know. But you know, I don't think she's humble enough for no fight, you know, for the belt, because she's really want to fight for the belt. No, but I think Amanda Nunes, she's fight all the time now, and she's in shape. And man, I don't know if she's doing good choice, you know. But Ronda run for me long time. This is no surprise me. She no fight me next fight. Of course not. She cannot take punch, you know. She didn't have a strong mind. She's only just kick her ass the last fight, and she's not feel confident. And I hope she's training hard for next fight, because Amanda is no easy opponent. You know, Amanda knows punch, and Misha Tate can say about this, you know, but you know, it's no easy fight, you know, no easy fight.
Are you worried? Because a lot of people are saying that Amanda Nunes has a good chance of beating Ronda Rousey, and if Ronda Rousey loses, people believe she'll retire from MMA. Are you worried that if she loses, that's it? You won't get an opportunity to fight her because she'll most likely retire from the sport?
Really, if Ronda really would like fight me, she's already dead. You know, I don't think if she doesn't win or lose the next fight, she's not gonna fight me. This is I already know. You know, she don't like challenge like herself. If she lose, she's gonna retire. And if she win, she will say, you had to come to the champ. And she'll be saying things she say before, you know, because she's not there for make challenge in big fights. You know, she's don't choose the opponent. And I don't think this fight gonna happen. You know, I know they might say, Ronda wanted to fight really bad. If she really wants this fight really bad, already happened. You know, people already watched this fight. You know, I don't believe in one word like this. She didn't even say my name. You know, before she's all the time say my name. You wanna fight me, Cris Cyborg. Now she don't say my name because we the same organization. She knows if she say my name, this fight's gonna happen. And if she's avoid me, no say my name. She say the reporters, no make a question about Cyborg, because if you make question about Cyborg, I'm not gonna answer you, and you be out my list of reporters. And then, you know, she played this game. I don't think this fight's gonna happen.
Have you, because for so long you were chasing this fight and now you're confident that it's not going to happen, have you given up on this fight? Have you basically moved on from this possibility of it ever happening? Are you just moving on with your career and focusing on other things now?
You know, I don't think I need Ronda for changing my life for anything, because everybody say, you need to fight Ronda. No, I don't think I need her for changing anything. I think people follow me a long time. My last fight, a lot of people watch. In Brazil, 30 million people watch. In America, 1.3 million people watch my fight. You know, with somebody nobody knows, because when the people see Cyborg, you know, and then, of course, if this fight Ronda happen, you know, fans would like to watch, and the biggest pay-per-view ever in the UFC. And if it don't happen, it's not my fault. You know, I already proved, I already make 140. Everybody knows I would like this fight. If it don't happen, no, because me, you know, I'm really happy with my job. You know, I'm a long time world champ, and I dropped 140 for giving the opportunity to make super fight. You know, I'm really happy with my job. I'm really happy what I'm doing for MMA. And, you know, I think I can do more with my division, maybe fight a division up. I don't know, doing super fight. I don't know. I think I did a lot of, and I want to keep doing.
Okay, well, let's go back to you. What's the time frame? I mean, you said we'll be finding out some news soon, but how soon can fans look forward to seeing you fight again? Do you know a certain amount of time that sort of will pass before we see you? How soon can we see you fight?
I really don't know when might be my next fight, but really after the last fight, I have like hard cut, and I really need a break. I was 2 years fight every 3 months, 4 months, and I really need a break. And you know, I'm taking a break, but for sure I would like to step in the case soon next year. And I really don't know who, you know, but I never choose my opponent. Who would fight me perfect, man? I'm ready. Of course, it'll be 145, and I just wait to what happened, but for sure I will have a job soon.
All right, well, that's good news. Good news all around. You'll be fighting at 145. We're excited to see what's next, Chris, and we have a big holiday season coming up. Tell us, seeing as you got a bit of time on your hands, you're not going to be preparing, how will Cyborg celebrate New Year's Eve? What do you have planned? And are you going to be eating a lot of delicious food over the Christmas and holiday season?
Happy New Year's. I'm going to Japan. I'm going to Reason. I'm help training Gabi Garcia. She's have a big fight. And New Year, and I'm really happy because I follow Japan fights a long time about before because Pride, and I'm come from shooter box, and I have a lot of stars from shooter box fighting in Japan, and I'll be there last year. I'll be there, I'm there sharing with Gabi and be amazing fight. It'll be tournament girls, and I think it'll be cool, and I'll be happy see the other girls compete there.
Well, there you guys go. She is the Invicta featherweight champion, and everybody's so excited to see what happens next. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Make sure to follow Chris on Twitter at Cris Cyborg, and make sure to watch her documentary. She's got the link in her bio. It's an absolutely amazing watch. Really tells you what she goes through to prepare for a fight. And Chris, we can't wait to see what's next. Thanks for coming on to Submission Radio.
No problem. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. This is Tyron, the Chosen One Woodley. You are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is coming off a classic war at UFC 205 that won Fight of the Night honors, where he took on Tyron Woodley. He joins us back on the program to reflect on that fight and more. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, how about that? He's back on the program. Welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going today, Stephen?
Doing great, my friend. Glad to be on with you guys.
It's great to hear your positive voice, and we really, really appreciate you taking the time. There's a lot to talk to you about, so we'll get straight into it. Have you had the chance to watch the fight yet? And if so, how many times have you watched it?
I've only watched it one time. I got back with my coaches, sitting there looking at, going back and watching the fight, looking at things I needed to work on. That's one thing we always do after a fight. If it's a first-round knockout or a five-minute-round fight, we always go back and we watch the fight just to see what I can go back and, fix things. And that way, next time I step out in the octagon, I'm going to be better.
Just quickly on that, what did your coaches say when you guys rewatched that? What were some of the comments that came out?
Obviously, one of the biggest things was coming in a little bit heavier. I was walking around 182 about 2 weeks before the fight. When I stepped in the octagon, I was weighing about 178, which is way too light, especially when you're fighting somebody like Tyron Woodley, who's probably stepping back in there at 195 or 200. So we're going to be walking around about a heavier weight, 195, staying around there. That way you see a bigger, stronger Steve Wonderboy Thompson.
Wow. A lot of people looking at this fight predicted that, you were going to be able to stay on the outside and pick him apart. You certainly had your moments where you did exactly that, but you also had moments where, he was able to implement his game plan and dominate. Just curious, now that the fight's over, what was the game plan? Why do you think he was able to have so much success against you compared to your previous opponents?
Well, there was a few things that happened. Of course, in the first round, I threw a lazy kick to the leg just to see how he would react to it, to see if he would drop his front hand down. Of course, the next kick would have been to the head, but when I threw that lazy kick, it just so happens he ended up catching the dang kick and ended up taking me down. But he felt really strong in the clinch position on top, so it was very difficult for me to get back up. I got guys who in the gym who fight at 185, 205, and Tyron felt just way stronger than those guys. Wow. So, you know what, just me walking around at a heavier weight is definitely going to help me out in those situations. I felt fine the second and third round, but in the fourth round, I felt really flat. My movement was gone for some reason. I saw the punches coming. I just didn't react fast enough to get out of the way or block them. I just basically was blocking with my face in the fourth round. But after that fight, after the fifth round, I got my second win, and I ended up, feeling very well in the fifth round.
Mm-mm. Well, he spoke on the MMA Hour just this week, and how he was calling your kicks, and there was actually some monologue in the octagon during the fight. Talk to us about that. What exactly happened? What was he saying? Did it throw you at all?
No, not at all, man. My dad was calling out combos and things like that, and he acted like he knew exactly what I was going to do, but he didn't. It didn't throw me off one bit.
What was he saying?
He's like, moneymaker or a spin kick or my dad would say different codes. He was like, "Oh, I know exactly what that's going to be. I know what that's going to be." And I'm like, "No, you don't." I'm sitting there telling him, like, "No, you don't. You have no idea what that's going to be." And now I do something different, or I throw the same combination my dad was telling me, and he had no idea what was coming. But I think he was just trying to play with my head, and that's another aspect of the game that you got to watch out for. He's a champion for a reason, not only physically, mentally, but he goes out there and he knows how to play the game, which is what I expected from the champ.
I mean, you're obviously giving him a lot of respect. When you sort of got up off your stool and the 5th round started, given how much of a favorite you were going to that fight, were you a little bit surprised that, this fight had gone so far and that he had made it so far?
Yeah, well, you know what? I knew it was going to be a 5-5 in a round, and that's I always prepare for it just in case. If a knockout happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But my cardio is there for a 5-5 in a round war, and that's what I'm prepared for it all the time. And that's a worst case scenario, really, for me. It's a 5-5 in a round war. But in that 5th round, I felt like I got my second win. I felt great. I could have gone 2 more rounds after that 5th round. Just moving, just trying to pick them apart. I knew it was slowing down. But the round before that was definitely a very difficult round for me. Like I said, I saw the punches coming, didn't have enough time to react to it. He landed those big shots. I went down. I started recovering. And basically, to be honest with you, I don't remember the 4th round. The only thing I remember in that 4th round was being in that guillotine and thinking to myself, all these people came and spent money to watch me fight. I am not going to tap. I'm not going to tap. And as soon as I thought that, I could feel his arms gassing out and start loosening up. So I stayed in that position, hoping his arms would gas out. And then from there, I looked for my way out, ended up getting that top position and finishing it out on top.
I'm just curious, with that guillotine, was that a crank, or was that actually in, and was he actually choking you? And were you on your way out?
It was actually a crank, to be honest with you. I mean, his arms were in, but I had my chin in position, a good position. I could still breathe, but it was very difficult for me to breathe. And how tired I was, it was very difficult for me to breathe. And it was almost to the point where, man, I should tap to this. But I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to tap. He's got me in this guillotine. If it's not choking me, I'm not tapping. Of course, it was hard to breathe, and I think most people would have tapped. But I was like, you know what? Screw this, man. I've worked too hard to get to where I am. I'm not going to sit there and tap out. I'm going to go out if need be. But as soon as I thought that, his arm started to get tired, and I worked my way out.
Yeah. I mean, we've been in crank guillotines before, even though we're not great at grappling. And I know that after I've been in a crank guillotine, my neck is just stuffed for a few days. How sore was your neck in the next round after that? Did he tweak it? Was it tough to sort of move your head around? Did he pull something? Did he even possibly hurt it? Talk to us about that.
I don't think he really injured anything, but my neck from the top of my head all the way down to the top of my butt is sore. And I know it was from that guillotine, him crank on that puppy. As soon as I started to get it, I tried to defend, try to posture up. I knew I couldn't posture up, so I started to get my butt up in the air to make it a little bit more difficult for him to get that crank in. And it definitely worked, Everything that I've been working against defending guillotines, and I have a long neck, I'm susceptible for guillotines, so a lot of guys throw that on me, so I know how to defend it very well. Well, fairly well anyway. But I ended up doing the right things, and at that time, as soon as I made up my mind, I'm not tapping, I could feel his arms start to tire out. And I knew if I held on a little bit longer, I was able to fight my way out of that.
It was one of many amazing moments in what was an amazing fight. Once it was over, how confident were you that, you had done enough to win? And sort of before that correction was made, what went through your mind when Bruce Buffer announced Tyron as the winner?
I knew he won the first round. He ended up taking me down off that lazy kick. He was very strong on the ground, so I knew I couldn't get up from that position. So I knew I had to wait it out. I knew I won the 2nd and 3rd round. That 4th round was obviously him, and the 5th round was mine as well. So I figured I pulled out enough to win. But you know what? He is the champion, man. And of course they gave him the 10-8 in the 4th. I think one judge gave him 10-8 4th round. One judge gave him 10-8 1st round, which I don't see that at all in the 1st round. But it is what it is, and it's going to make this second fight even that much better when I bring that title belt back home.
You got to talk to us about that moment with the Bruce Buffer. I mean, we spoke to you a bit about it at the post-fight press conference, and I mean, it's been a little bit of time since it's happened. So now when you look back on it, what sort of went through your mind when you saw Bruce leave the ring, come back, and reread the decision? Was it one of those situations where you were relieved because you knew you might get another shot at the title? Talk to us about the emotion that was going through your head as that was going on, because it was a pretty crazy scene.
You know what? In the beginning, I really didn't see Bruce Buffer kind of go in the cage, go back out the cage. I'm sitting there talking to my coaches. And, of course, he announced that Tyron won the fight. And then I'm sitting there like, what the crap, man? I knew I won the second, third, and fifth round. I'm going through my head. And I look at Dana White. He's like, no, dude, stay up in here. It was a draw. It was definitely a draw. I'm like, okay, crap. Yes, man, this could definitely happen. We could definitely get another fight out of this. And so, all those emotions going through my head, thinking I won the fight and I didn't win the fight, and then going to, hey, this is a draw. We can end up fighting again. It was chaos, to be honest with you. It was all crazy in my head. But the final judgment was, it was a draw, which means we are going to be able to fight again. And I think the fans enjoyed the fight. I think they loved it. It was very exciting. So, dude, I'm so down to do it again. We're looking at February, hopefully, to get this next title shot going.
Oh, wow, there you go. I mean, there was an interesting contrast. We saw Tyron sort of walking to the back, and, he was visibly very, very disappointed. We saw you going back, and you and your dad were high-fiving fans, and you had, like, a big smile on your face. Even though the fight sort of didn't go your way, most people have said that you and Tyron are responsible for putting on Madison Square Garden's first MMA Classic in a fight that, will be remembered for the ages. Do you take solace in the fact that, the way it's going to be remembered and the way people were moved by your fight?
You know what? That's exactly what I was thinking. Even though I didn't bring that belt home, I know I won a lot of fans over that night. Just to, a lot of people see me, as a fighter, but they don't see the heart that goes into it, the perseverance that goes into it. They just see just me, and I don't look like a fighter. But I'm glad that everybody, the world, was able to see what kind of heart I have and perseverance and indomitable spirit I have in that octagon. It doesn't matter who I face. Once I step out there, I'm out there to put on a show and give it all I got. There's no giving up in this guy, and that's what I've been taught since day one, since I've been in this sport, and that's what all the fans are going to see. So anybody who steps out there with me knows that they're in for a rough night.
Well, in the lead up to this fight, there was a bit of rivalry between you and Tyron actually ended up apologizing in the post-fight press conference and called you a stand-up guy. I mean, what do you think of that and Tyron as a person now? Is the beef squashed? And do you feel like sort of a new beef will emerge if he doesn't sort of take this rematch and goes down another path?
You know what? It is all respect, and you really don't learn about a whole lot about somebody until you fight them. And only fighters know what that feels like. Knowing what's in somebody truly deep down until after you fight them. And there's a lot more respect after somebody you go out there and do battle with. And I think Tyron felt that, and much respect to him. I've always had respect to him, and I'm glad he has a little bit more respect for me after that fight. But you know what? It is what it is, and we're going to fight again. And you know what? I think just the fight alone does all the talking for us. I don't think we have to go out there and talk trash about anything. I think everybody knows when we step out there, they're going to enjoy a show. We're going to put on a show and fight for our lives, man.
Dana White said during the press conference that the rematch makes sense between the two of you. You said you're eyeing February. Have you had any further communications with anyone from the UFC to confirm that, this is the fight that will be taking place? And who sort of said February? Was it you and your camp or anyone from the UFC?
We haven't heard anything yet from the UFC. That's just kind of what we're thinking about healing up time, getting these lacerations on my nose fixed. I don't have a broken nose, but just some little lacerations that we need to get healed up and get back in the swing of things. And to be honest with you, it's a short turnaround. But UFC hasn't said anything to us yet. I think they have. I think they're just waiting on me for me to heal up for both of us. And I know Tyron is shooting for a shorter date. I know he's calling out Conor McGregor, but I think I deserve it, man. I mean, us going out there and it being a draw is like we never fought at all. It's a tie basically. So we got to go out there and we got to settle this, and we're going to settle it. Hopefully here pretty soon.
Yeah, what do you think about this whole Conor McGregor thing? Do you think that this title rematch is owed to you? And I mean, if it doesn't happen, if Tyron does go in a different direction, what happens to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson? Do you sit out and wait? Do you fight someone else? Do you sort of what do you do in that situation?
For me, I'm a fighter, man, and fighters we're just gonna fight, and that's up to my management company and the UFC to figure out. But I do believe that I deserve the next title shot against Tyron Woodley because it was a draw. It was like we never fought at all. So we got to go out there and we got to settle who is the real champion. Who is it? I think the fans enjoyed that last fight enough that they're gonna tune in for that. And I've heard from a lot of people who are excited about that next title shot, that rematch between me and Tyron.
Any concerns on your mind? I mean, obviously, I think this is the fight to make, you and Tyron rematch, but given the way the UFC a lot of times sort of, makes the fights that Conor wants, we don't know what Conor wants, but is there any concern on your part that if Conor says, you know what, I want Tyron, you might somehow get leapfrogged in this situation?
You know what? Not at all, man. To be honest with you, I think the UFC knows that I deserve that title shot. I deserve that rematch. And you know what? I think that Conor McGregor's got to defend the 45 and the 55 title. And I just think he's too small for the 170 division. I mean, he's walking around right at 170, maybe a little bit less. It's just, I don't think it would be a good division for him to step up to.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, while we're on the subject of McGregor, you were there, we were all there. What did you think about his win over Eddie Alvarez later on in the night?
I thought it was outstanding, man. I mean, he went out there and did exactly what he said he was going to do. To be honest, it just looked like he played with him. He played with Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez is a monster. He's a beast and a good friend of mine. But he actually went out there and did exactly what he said he was going to do. He picked him apart and ended up winning with a TKO. And man, he's an amazing athlete. Not only can he talk the talk, but he can walk the walk.
I mean, you got to give the guy credit. I mean, he put in an amazing performance, but you mentioned just before he's too small for 170. He's angling for that fight. We don't know if it'll happen, at some point. But if that version of Conor McGregor that showed up against Eddie Alvarez came to 170 against, say, Tyron or yourself, what do you think would happen?
You know what? I think it would be a good fight, no matter what, man. I mean, he's one of the best fighters out there, and that's what we're out to do. We're out to fight the best fighters in whatever division, whoever steps up. We'll take on any challenges, and I think that's what fighters do. And if you're a champion or not, you should take on all challenges. And I think it would be a good fight. I think the fans would tune in to see who would win.
It's interesting because he was sort of angling for this welterweight fight, sort of from the beginning during the fight week. I was there. I was asking Conor if he wanted Woodley's belt and asking Woodley what his thoughts on it were. And then we saw what happened at the early weigh-ins. From being around that and seeing that, what did you think of McGregor as sort of the ultimate businessman and already setting up his next moves and trying to get this rivalry started with Tyron Woodley?
I think it's very smart, very intelligent for him. I mean, he's already out there, talking trash to Tyron and doing his thing, man. I mean, doing what Conor McGregor does. I mean, just think about it. A few years ago, he was living in his car. He had no money. Now he's a multimillionaire. I mean, hats off to that guy. That guy, I'm happy for that guy. A lot of people look down on people who are successful, but Conor McGregor is successful because he runs his mouth and he knows how to put on a show. I mean, look at his press conferences. I mean, come on. People show up just to see him just act nuts. And it's hats off to that guy, man. He's a very intelligent, very smart guy.
Just quickly, Sam, we do really appreciate your time. On Chris Weidman, you guys have a close relationship. We saw both of you doing the press conference together. He mentioned that he was able to sort of get something positive out of this experience, even though he lost, obviously, in such a brutal fashion to Yoel Romero. Have you spoken to Chris in the last few days? How's he doing? And was it, you mentioned that you saw the fight and it was tough for you to sort of process. How much, looking back on it, how much did that affect you going into your fight with Woodley? How much did that sort of knock you off your mental game?
Of course, it definitely hurt me, man. It hurt my heart, man, to see him actually going out there, winning the first and second round, and then just catching that flying knee and just putting him out. Of course, it definitely hurt me deep down, hurt for him and his family. And but you know what? On the other hand, I know Chris Weidman's going to come back better and stronger than ever. That's just who he is, and that's how his heart is. But it didn't affect me one bit. I knew as soon as that was over, I knew how to get back in the zone and knew that I had business to do, and that was with Tyron Woodley that night, and I had to get in the zone. Everybody keeps asking me, my performance, was it affected by that? I don't think so at all. I went out there and fought my heart out, and Tyron is a very tough opponent. He's the champion for a reason. And, we'll do it again. And I know Chris Weidman will come back bigger and better and stronger than what you guys saw him last time.
Well, speaking of coming back bigger, better, and stronger, and of course you and Tyron doing this fight again, you spoke about the improvements before, but in your mind, why do you see yourself getting your hand raised this time when you guys do the rematch? And hopefully it is the rematch that happens.
You know what? After every defeat, I always come back better and stronger. That's just who I am. I know that, it being a draw, that to me, that's a loss. And I accept that. And I'm going to go back with my coaches, and I'm just going to get better. That's all I can do. And you know what? If I go out there with just a little bit more of a skill set, I've got the heart. Everybody knows I have the heart to go out there and take his shots and defend against the best fighters in the UFC. I'm going to go out there and give it all I got, and that's all I can see. I can just see my hand raised. I know I'm going to go back and prepare myself for the best. And fix anything that I needed fixed. Always come in the gym with my cup empty, and I'm gonna go out there and give it all my God. And if it win or loss, the fans are gonna be impressed, and they're gonna know that I am a warrior.
And well, lastly, Stephen, we know how important it is for you to set an example for your students back in Simpsonville, South Carolina. And we saw though some of your students, there was a cute moment that you put up on Instagram. They came into the class and they had like fake black eyes that they put on to support you when you came back. So talk to us a little bit about that reaction during your homecoming from your students and people at the karate school and people in your hometown. How has it been? How has the support been? How has it been dealing with everybody since you've come back from New York?
You know what? It's just all been amazing. I flew in late Sunday night after the fight, and I expected to go home and go straight to sleep, just kind of heal up and rest. And next thing you know, I was being escorted by police officers to our city, and there was hundreds and hundreds of people out there supporting me, and that just got emotional. Even though I didn't bring the title home, it meant the world to me that all my community, my friends, my family were there to support me no matter what. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to get better and stronger is for them. It was just amazing. The next week, of course, I'm coming in karate class with looking like a raccoon, 2 black eyes. My students are coming in with makeup on with black eyes, supporting my black eyes. It was awesome, man. It definitely would just puts a smile on my face and much more affectionate to my students, man. It was awesome. It was unbelievable.
Well, that's an amazing moment in on itself. And Stephen, we just wanted to say thank you, and obviously to Tyron as well, but since we got you here on the line right now, we just wanted to say thank you for what was an amazing, amazing fight. Everybody unanimously enjoyed it, and the crowd was extremely into it when we were there watching the fight. So thank you for putting on an amazing performance. We hope that rematch happens. Guys, don't forget to follow Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on Twitter and Instagram at Wonderboy MMA. A lot of goodness there, and we thank you for your time. Thanks so much for popping on the program. We always enjoy talking to you, Stephen.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you having me on. You guys have a good one.
Hi, guys. It's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Back here on the program is a man who stood up Submission Radio at the bar last week in New York. That's right. I'm from his amazing work with Fox Sports. Damon Martin it's a surprise you didn't stand us up for the program. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
I tell man, just digging at me hard right now.
I was standing there with a beer just looking for you, but no, it's all good. Thanks for joining us. Now, guys, if you didn't notice, we were over in New York last week covering UFC 205. There was a special episode of Submission Radio, the Submission Radio Lounge episode, where we broke down a lot of thoughts from what happened that weekend. But before we jump into everything that happened this weekend in the crazy world of MMA, Casper, you got a couple of takeaways from UFC 205 that you just want to quickly bring up with me and Damon.
Yeah, so a lot of times when we do these post shows, we've missed a lot of the card. There were certain things going on when we were doing interviews and scrums, and we were interviewing Conor McGregor's dad and Owen Roddy while Conor McGregor was speaking. So afterwards, it sort of went away, and I rewatched some of these scrums, and a few things I noticed, a few things that I sort of wanted to sort of say on the show. One is, everybody's sort of talking about Conor McGregor and what happens with the lightweight division, the featherweight division, when he's going to fight next. I want to run this theory by you guys, and that is that Conor McGregor, I think it's a possibility that we could see him fight before May. When you look at this post-fight press conference, he never gives a hard stance on when he's returning. He's asked the question, he dodges it. And, I'm not the first one to point out that it seems like it's a negotiation tactic. And a lot of people are thinking, well, he wants equity and he wants money and things like that. And he's going to take time to sort of, be around his girlfriend. And I got to tell you guys, pregnant women are very, very, very independent. I mean, my girlfriend's best friend's pregnant. She wants to work until 8 months pregnant. So I think theoretically, the idea that Conor McGregor is kind of locked down until his girlfriend gives birth, I don't think that's a given. I think he can take as much time to spend with her as he really wants. And I think that, if the UFC come to him and say, hey, we've got a great deal for you. We've got, the equity, this, stocks, shares, everything. You're going to be an owner of the company and whatever. You're going to be behind the cameras if you want. And here's the fight that you want. And this fight makes sense. I'm not saying the negotiations will be anything like that. But I think theoretically, if they come to him with the offer that he wants, that he's angling for, I think we might see him fight before May. Because theoretically, that's 6 months away, and given his past schedule of taking fights, I think he could do it. What do you think, Damon?
I think it's definitely possible. I think it all depends on what the UFC comes to the table with. I mean, I know, Conor said he wants ownership, he wants equity. If anyone in the history of our sport has earned that, or has at least earned the conversation, it's definitely Conor McGregor. So it depends on what the UFC comes to the table with. If they come to the table and say, hey, yeah, we're going to give you percentage, or we're going to give you a co-promotion label on your fights, give you a bigger percentage of the purses when you fight, whatever the case may be, then I could see him taking that shot and coming back, I would say maybe March or April. I mean, I think he's earned the layoff, if he wants to lay off until May or June. But I could see it happening. I could absolutely see it happening, especially if the money's right. Now, listen, if his girl really does get that nervous and that, stressful when he fights, and that's really the reason why he wants to take the time off, as Dana said, because he's worried that, it might affect the pregnancy, then that supersedes money, that supersedes promotion, that supersedes anything. But if you take that out of the equation, I think there's always going to be money that can get a guy back to the table. And if they give him a co-promoter label for his fight, I think we could absolutely see Conor back before then.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation as well, because afterwards, when he does have the baby, you'd think that he'd have to spend quite a bit of time with D and the baby, sort of helping out, making sure everything is done. That's a very stressful period as well, and that's a period that can go on for a few months as well. But I agree with you, Damon and Casper. If the contract is big, if it's just undeniable, there may be a possibility he comes back. The only reason I think it may not happen is because we all know the stories of how much work D has put into his career and how hard she's worked to sort of, in the early days when he didn't have much, to help him out and give him an opportunity to fight. I think this might be an opportunity where he sees it's his turn to sort of give back to her. And the whole stress thing is an interesting one. I don't know if it's a real factor or not. If it's a real factor, then I don't think any money could bring him back. If D wouldn't be affected by the fact that he's fighting, then in terms of being stressed out and it would affect the pregnancy, then I think there's a chance. But I don't know, because he's made a shitload of money off this last fight as well, guys, which is another big point. So I'm just wondering if to him the amount of money that he's made from UFC 205 is enough to sort of lay him over until he next gets back to the octagon. And I guess the big question is, how this conversation goes between him and Dana White, because we keep hearing Dana go, okay, I'm going to have this conversation with Conor McGregor once everything settles down, let him enjoy everything. And I'm curious how that conversation goes, because if Dana still tries to take one of the titles away from him, And the only way he can keep it is if he does fight before, then he does get a crazy contract. Maybe that's what pushes it over the line. It's very interesting.
I think it really depends on what Conor wants to do. The ball is in his court. If he wants, and I'm not saying that he will fight beforehand. I'm just saying people are kind of looking at it like, well, his girlfriend's pregnant. It's impossible. It's not impossible. Him being a businessman, if he gets a good offer, he'll take it. I think if it doesn't happen before May, I think if the baby is born, I would definitely say he's going to take a few months, at least 3, 4, maybe more, to sort of enjoy it. It's the birth of his first child. But even at the press conference, like, he talked about how he's kind of running away from it and he's stressed about it. I mean, nothing takes the stress away for yourself than, with a fight and having something, on your mind to sort of take the stress away. And look, if he wants to spend time with her, no one can say he doesn't deserve it, and that's entirely up to him. But with the money that they've made, they could hire the best help. They could have, a 20-person team around D all the time. But you talked about Dana having that conversation with him. I just wanted to get your thoughts, guys, because a lot of people have been asking us this past week about this Khabib and Tony Ferguson situation and, potentially giving up one of the belts. I don't think that, even the Khabib deserves that next title shot, and Tony Ferguson kind of shot himself in the foot by not really saying much after his phenomenal win, and Khabib sort of brought in the whole country versus country aspect and really sold the fight. I don't think any of these guys are going to be getting that title shot anytime soon, because theoretically, if Conor comes back, I think the featherweight title is, desperately needs some attention. If he's not going to do that, then, I just think with the time frame, if he does come back in sort of a year or so, those guys are going to have to be active and stay busy. What do you guys think? What do you think, Damon? Do you think he should be stripped, and do you think Khabib or Tony will ever see that title shot?
I think my opinion would be this. I would like to see, listen, Conor's the first ever 2-division champion. Let him soak it in for a little while. We're not in a position right now where we have any clear-cut big money fights for him right now, except for the fight that I truly believe will be next for him, which is the Nate Diaz trilogy. My prediction has been Conor, Nate 3 in July. Now, I know that pushes back, past May, which is kind of what he's hinted at and a little bit what Dana's hinted at, but they always put on these huge cards in July every year. That's the International Fight Week card. That's always a huge, position of power for the UFC. I think if you do that fight in July with Conor, Nate 3, it's a monstrous fight, maybe the biggest fight in UFC history. And then you let Khabib fight Tony, maybe even you do an interim title. I know people hate interim titles, and I hate even really suggesting that, but, maybe you do that to appease Khabib, and then, that way you guarantee him with a win that he's going to get the title shot after that against, Conor and Nate. I think Conor eventually, when it comes time to him booking his next fight, I think he will give up the featherweight title, but I think it's going to wait until he gets that title defense scheduled, if you know what I mean. I think it's going to wait until they say, hey, you're fighting Nate, and then he'll say, okay, I'm fighting Nate for the lightweight title. I'll give up the featherweight title. And listen, Jose Aldo hasn't settled his beef with the UFC right now. We still don't know 100% sure that he's going to come back. It looks like he is, but until that is signed, sealed, and delivered, I'm not going to believe it. We got Holloway fighting Pettis in December at UFC 206. The winner of that fight, we assume, would go on to fight Jose Aldo for the interim title. And then at that point, Conor could give up the belt right then maybe and say, okay, now you can have the real title. However you want to do it, but I think he will eventually give up that belt, but I don't think it will be before he books his next fight, or if they end up doing the Aldo Pettis Holloway, whoever survives that fight, I don't think that would even happen until probably, I'm guessing, March, April. I mean, Aldo's not been the most consistent fighter throughout his career dealing with injuries, so I don't think they're going to push for that to happen immediately after Pettis and Holloway, and neither is Pettis for that matter. Pettis hasn't been the healthiest fighter in his career either. So I think if that happens, then let's say April, March or April or something like that, then I could definitely see him giving up the title at that point. But yeah, I think Khabib and Tony are probably going to end up fighting each other, because I've said it for months. I think we're headed to Conor Nate 3.
And I like your plan, and I like your theory. I just want to get your thoughts, Dennis. Are we sort of all on the same page that now that Conor has had this chance to, win both belts, he's a dual champion, he's the first person to ever do it, and obviously has the skill to do it, but part of that is because the promotion sort of allowed this to happen. And, are we all on the same page that now that he's been able to do that, he should give up one of the belts? I mean, it's all well and good to be as active as he is, and he's, incredibly active, but the whole theory about defending both belts, it goes out the window when you take in these detours, with Nate Diaz, and now seemingly the most tasty fights are either Nate Diaz or Khabib or Tony, all fights that don't really point anything to do with the featherweight division. What do you think, Dennis? Do you think he should be stripped of the title, or at least he gives up the featherweight belt?
Yeah, well, I agree with both you guys. I mean, look, he's done everything there is to do in featherweight. He's got both belts now, and I think if he does give up the featherweight title, he's still, in a lot of people's minds, the featherweight champion. And I mean, he can go around saying, "Hey, I'm the dual champion. Yeah, I gave up the belt, but no one actually beat me for it, so I'm still the champion." And I guess it does take away a little bit from whoever becomes a featherweight champion. But maybe one day you have a featherweight champion who's destroying everyone once again, and then there's a big super fight where McGregor can go back down and get the featherweight belt again if he can do that. But I guess to me, with what we were talking about before with him coming back in July, the big thing for me is what's going to happen with Ronda Rousey in December, because if you have Ronda Rousey lose at UFC 207 and then she retires and you lose your draw, you're looking at the calendar year for the UFC next year, and even though John Jones is coming back, you're not seeing any of these huge money cards happening like they have been this year because McGregor's been fighting so frequently. So I think if Ronda Rousey retires, it almost feels like the UFC gives McGregor even a better offer to come back in July and fight earlier. But just speaking on that fact, I do believe that Nate is the next person to fight him for that belt. And to me, guys, I don't know if you felt like this or not, but when we were talking to Khabib in the back after UFC 205, to me, I got this feeling like he just wants to be taken seriously by the UFC. He just wants Dana White to treat him properly. He just wants to have the UFC behind him, the promotion machine behind him. I think he feels like the UFC's behind Conor McGregor and they're pushing him, and no one's really pushing Khabib. So I feel like even if they can't give him the next title shot, if they have a meeting with him, maybe beef up his contract, really get behind him, promote him a bit more, I think there's a chance Khabib might be happy enough to do that for the time being. Do you guys sort of agree with that, or do you think he'll still be pretty angry if he doesn't get that title shot? I'll ask you first, Damon.
I think here's the thing. I think with how they can make Khabib happy, and we know Dana has said him and Ari are going to Russia in the next few weeks to start planning a card over there. I think you make Khabib versus Tony. Maybe it's not an interim title. Maybe it is an interim title. If Conor really is going to be out until July, I know I hate interim titles, and I don't think it's fair to introduce them for no reason. But listen, we've introduced titles for lesser reasons. John Jones got an interim title for. I have still to this day, have no idea why he got an interim title back in April when Daniel Cormier was just injured. It wasn't like he was out for 2 years or anything crazy. But listen, do a card in Russia. Let Khabib go over there and become the star that he wants so desperately to become. Watch if the crowd goes nuts for him like they went nuts for him in a Reebok store a couple of years ago. If you guys saw that video when he went to a Reebok store and the people lost their minds for Khabib.
Where was this? A Reebok store in Russia?
In Moscow, yeah. It was like a ridiculous amount, like 3,000 people showed up, and like they stormed the store, and craziness ensued when he showed up. Let him go to Russia, become a star. Now, you've done two things with that. One, you've made Khabib happy and satisfied by putting on a card in Russia and letting him headline. And two, if he wins and the crowd goes nuts as you would expect they would do for Khabib to be the next Fedor or the next big superstar in Russia, then you can actually sell a fight with Conor and Khabib, because now you have a legit guy with a legit country behind him. You've opened up that market, and now you can sell the fight between Conor and Khabib, because now that's a huge fight. You can put it on in Europe, you can put it on in America. You've got a huge Russian fan base, you got a huge Irish fan base, and you got just a huge audience in general that would want to see that fight, and you keep Khabib happy without necessarily giving him the title shot.
You know what I love, Khabib, and I love your plan, Dame. You know what I love, Khabib, is that he's a guy who English isn't his first language, and yet he's just killing it with the trash talk. Conor McGregor, calling Conor McGregor, the UFC's chicken, and making it this whole big Ireland versus Russia thing. I love that he found that angle, and then he sort of ran with it, and he did it, on this massive stage in UFC 205, New York. We know that, every country is patriotic, but especially Americans, and you go in there, Khabib acting like the biggest heel there is, almost reminds me of Iron Sheik back in the day, in the WWF days, really going for this whole patriotic angle. So I like it if he goes to Russia and he can, get one more big win. Not that I think he needs to do it. I think he definitely deserves the title shot at the moment, but you're right, the way things are going to play out, it almost seems like he's going to be forced into doing. But if he can be a bigger star than, he already is, I would love to see, him and Conor really go for this whole, country versus country angle.
And the funny thing is, guys, I mean, him versus Tony Ferguson, that's a tough fight. Tony Ferguson has a good chance of winning that fight. But I think if he beats Tony Ferguson, the UFC really needs to get behind Khabib because, like you said, Casper, he really brought his A game at UFC 205. I think a lot of money can be made with this guy. So I think they got to jump behind him. But, guys, let's jump to breaking down some of the fights over this weekend. As MMA fans know, it was a crazy weekend in MMA sports. A whole bunch of different cards happening almost at the same time across the world in different countries. And we're going to break down the UFC ones, the Mousasi Hall Belfast card. There was some action there, some fun fights, some exciting fights, but we're going to jump to the main event with Mousasi and Hall 2. I mean, Gegard looked like, Damon, that he really wanted to get this one back to prove that he could beat Hall and get this scratched off his record. I mean, it was a relatively short fight. To me, it actually looked like Uriah Hall sort of shut off mentally when he was on the ground with Mousasi, and he looked kind of nervous in that fight to me as well. What were your takeaways from Mousasi's performance and the way the fight went down? Were you surprised at all, or did it sort of go how you pretty much thought it would go?
It went pretty much the way I thought it would go. I thought Mousasi would win. I thought ultimately he would get the TKO. I was a little surprised the way it played out in terms of, once he got it to the ground, it ended up being that lopsided. I thought Uriah would be able to survive a little bit longer than he did, but he just kind of got trapped in a bad position on the mat and ate a lot of punches. And, people have said maybe it was a little early stoppage, but at the same time, the problem was Uriah wasn't doing anything to get out of that position. He was just kind of laying there eating the shot. So it didn't really surprise me. Listen, Gegard was winning the last fight. It was a pretty lopsided first round. And then, of course, Uriah hit that spinning back heel kick and knocked him for a loop. Listen, kudos to Uriah. That was a phenomenal victory and a phenomenal way to end that fight. But he was losing that fight, pretty handily through that first round. And I think we're seeing a much better, much stronger Gegard Mousasi right now, much more confident Gegard Mousasi. So I think, ultimately it played out the way I saw it would. Uriah is a good fighter, but I don't think he's a top 10 fighter. I think I never want to use the word lucky. It's such an insult to our sport because if you throw a kick and you mean to land it and you land it, there's nothing with luck involved. But when I say luck, I mean it like this. I don't think most people would have picked Uriah Hall to beat Gegard the first time. I don't think a lot of people picked him to win the second time. I just think Uriah Hall's one of those guys who's going to be fun to earn a couple good knockouts here and there, but we've seen him consistently lose to the better guys he's fought, and I think that's just the story with this guy.
Yeah, we saw that interview that Mike Bond did with him for MMA Junkie, and man, I don't know. He said some stuff about how the media don't promote him and all this other stuff, and he was very, very negative. Me and Casper interviewed him for UFC 193, and he wasn't very big on the media, but just mentally, I don't know, he just seems a little bit bitter and not happy with the way things are going down. Cass, we had Luke Rockhold on the program earlier, and he said his recovery time was going to take a bit longer than we thought. Who would you have Mousasi fight next if you were the matchmaker?
I think that Mousasi at this point, he's very much deserving of a big name, but I think just timetable-wise, he's probably going to get the winner of Robert Whittaker or Derek Brunson. Whoever wins that fight is going to be really close to a title shot, very similar to sort of the trajectory that Gegard Mousasi's on, so I think they face off in pretty much a title eliminator. Luke Rockhold, I mean, that's a scary situation. He may be back, I think he said February. And if he does come back in February, I think you still go with Jacare. I know Jacare wants Bisping, but that's obviously not going to happen. It's going to be a Romero versus Bisping. So I think you keep the Rockhold Jacare fight intact, and then you give Mousasi. You could give him the winner of Robert Whittaker and Derek Brunson, or if you want, you could give him a showcase fight against Anderson Silva. Other than that, there aren't really too many other options. Weidman's just coming off a devastating loss, so I think a win over him for Mousasi probably wouldn't mean as much as some of the other fights. And as far as Uriah Hall, I mean, he's on 3 straight losses in a row. Now, you could look at some of his losses and say, look, they were against really good guys. I mean, Robert Whittaker, he's on the fringe of a title shot. Derek Brunson, very much the same. Gegard Mousasi, very much the same. So you would probably give him maybe one more shot. I think he's worth it, but if not, he may find happiness. You mentioned how he's a bit disgruntled, and I don't know, people keep talking about him like he's an up-and-coming prospect, and, if he finds that mental game and if he finds his killer instinct, I don't know if that's ever going to come. I mean, he's not a new guy in the sport. He's been doing it for a while. He's been doing it for well over 10 years, almost coming up on 11, 12 years. So I think he might find a bit more happiness in Bellator, where they can sort of put him up against guys similar to the trajectory to, say, Michael Venom Page, and, have him be a knockout artist. And in Bellator, he'd be a big fish in a small pond, and, they could really give him the star treatment. He could get a bunch of highlight reel knockouts, and who knows, maybe even find his way all the way to being a middleweight champion. So I think that's kind of what's best for both those guys.
Yeah, I don't see the UFC letting Rockhold go for at least another couple of losses. I think that he's just got a name value, and I think for what they pay him, he sort of brings interest to some of these smaller fight night cards. But I think you're right. If he goes over to Bellator, he's probably likely to have a bit more success. Damon, we're going to jump over to the Brazil card, the UFC Fight Night 100, Beta versus Lil Nog. Before we jump to that main event, we want to talk about Claudia Gadelha versus Casey. I mean, this was a pretty dominant performance of Claudia. She did pretty much, what she needed to do. There was a bit of controversy that I want to get to. There was that phantom kick. Now, I'm not sure if it was phantom or not, guys. I watched the replay a number of times. One time, it kind of looked like a little bit of the ankle sort of grazed over the top of her head. Other times, it looked like it didn't hit at all. Damon, I'll go with you first. Did you think that kick landed? What exactly happened in that moment?
Watching the replay numerous times in kind of slow motion and everything, it looked like the kick slightly glanced off the forehead and then kind of bounced off the ponytail or the pony knob behind it in her hair. So I think it did catch her slightly. I don't know that it caught her flush. It looked like it kind of grazed off the forehead, and I can understand that. Listen, when you get caught, depending on, where you get caught in the head or the jaw or behind the ear, all these kind of spots, it can definitely rattle you. So I do think she got hit a little bit. I don't know if maybe she oversold it, to get that break. I'm not sure. But I do think it did land. I think it glanced, but I don't think it did, that much damage ultimately. And, again, Claudia was winning the fight in pretty much a blowout. You can never tell what's going through someone's head in that moment. Maybe she wanted the break. Maybe it did clip her and you just kind of get stunned in that moment and she came back. I don't know. Ultimately, it really didn't matter because Claudia won and the right person got the victory. And that's exactly, what she should have done.
Casper, I'm curious. A lot of people wondering why a point wasn't taken. Do you think a point should have been taken, or because it didn't look like the kick really landed, are you in support of the fact that nothing was really done by the referee? I mean, if you're the referee and you see the way Courtney Casey is reacting, I think that based on the fact that you've stopped the fight already or sort of, gone to a timeout, you should probably deduct a point. I mean, I think I'm like you guys. I watched the replay a number of times. I think for 5 minutes straight, I was just going back and forth, watching different angles. It looked to me like it did sort of clip her. If you can see Claudia Gadelha's foot, the trajectory changes and her ankle kind of wobbles at one point. So it leads me to believe that it did actually connect. I think a point should have been taken away. But like you said, Damon, the fight was already pretty much sealed. There wasn't too much that that she could have done really to sort of win back. So I don't know. I think it was just a sort of goof on the referee's part. Well, we're in an interesting situation, fellas, because Gadelha wins. But what happens with her next? Damon, what do you do with Gadelha next if you have a choice of who to put her up against?
You match her up with Carla Esparza because that's a fight that should have happened in Invicta years ago. That was supposed. I mean, that fight. I think it was scheduled twice, if not 3 times, and fell apart every single time. So why not do it now? Carla's coming off a win. Obviously, Claudia's off a win. Neither one of them are going to fight Joanna Jędrzejczyk anytime soon. They both lost to her. I mean, Claudia twice, and Carla got dominated and knocked out by her literally 1 fight ago. So why not have them fight each other? It's a fight I've wanted to see for a lot of years. You got Carla Esparza's wrestling against Claudia's jiu-jitsu. And I think there's still a little bit of bad blood there. If you go back to Bellator, or excuse me, go to Invicta a couple years ago, there was some bad blood between those two. I'd like to see it. And again, you're not knocking off another contender because they both fought Joanna. Neither one of them are going to fight Joanna again, I would assume, anytime really, really soon. So I would say that's the one that makes the most sense.
Very, very tempting, and I love the way you sold that. I'm going to rain in your parade, Damon, and throw a bit of a spanner in the works, and feel free to rebut me after this, but I kind of feel like Claudia Gadelha, she's in that Gina Dos Santos, Joseph Benavidez territory where they're quite clearly the second best, but they've lost to the champion twice, and they're probably not going to get a rematch anytime soon. I would actually not really rush her in any way. I would potentially give Carla Esparza to Jessica Andrade, or you just give Andrade the next title shot. I think if Joanna's ready around March or so, that will be around about a 7-month turnaround time, so you could slot Andrade there straight away. But if not, give her Esparza. I think with Gadea, give her somebody like Marina Moroz. Give her time to sort of, build herself back up. I think she's probably a good, 3, 4, maybe 3 fights away from, getting another title shot. Even though the first 2 fights were great, I feel like they're still very fresh in everybody's minds, and Joanna won both of them. What do you think, Damon?
I definitely don't have a problem with that. I mean, listen, that's the I mean, I think Jessica Andrade is the fighter that makes the most sense to get a title shot. I would like to see her get one more win. I mean, she had a dominant performance against Joanne Calderwood. She just decimated Jessica Penne. So I don't necessarily have a problem with her getting the title shot, but I think I would like to see her get one more win. But the problem is when you throw in somebody like that against Carla Esparza, you run the risk that she loses, and then you're back to square one where you don't really have a number one contender, for the title. That's why, listen, in a weird way, as much as maybe Jessica Andrade probably should fight one more time, there's really not another clear-cut contender out there. I mean, you're not going to give it to Carolina. As much as she wants that rematch, she's not getting it. You're not going to do Claudia for a third time right away. Carla has only fought once since losing to Joanna. She's been very inactive and dealing with injuries. So who else is there? It's Jessica Andrade. So that's why I suggest doing Esparza and Gadelia. And I guess with that being said, you give Andrade the title shot, even though, again, I would like to see her get another win under her belt. That's just a risk you may not be able to afford to take with no one else really in line to fight the champion.
What about Karolina Kowalkiewicz? What happens with her? Why doesn't she fight anybody? If she doesn't get this rematch with Joanna, what do you guys think happens to her? Would you guys put her up against Claudia? What would you do with her? Damon?
I'd put Carolina against somebody like Joanne Calderwood, another striker. Let her go out there and have another fight that is probably going to end up being a striking match. I mean, of course, Carolina does have, solid wrestling as well, and that may come into play in a fight like that. But again, Carolina's not getting the rematch. As much as she wants it, she's not getting it. I mean, she had one good moment against Joanna, and outside of that, it was a pretty solid win for the champ. And again, I don't know, listen, you could do Carolina against Carla, I suppose. That's a different fight. We haven't seen it yet, but I think the history with Carla and Claudia kind of trumps that. So I would do maybe Carolina against somebody like, Joanne Calderwood, a good striking fight. It gives her a chance to fight another top 10 opponent and to get a win over another striker. And again, listen, maybe Joanne, shows up. I think Joanne looked phenomenal in her fight against Valerie Letourneau, and then she just got outmatched on the ground by Jessica Andrade, but I still think Joanne Calderwood is one of the best strikers in this division, and why not have a fight with somebody like Carolina? It's a fun fight, and chances are it's going to be a bit of a barn burner.
I like where your head's at, Dennis, this whole Karolina Kowalkiewicz against Claudia Gadelha matchup. It'd be a fun fight, but I guess the only problem is they're both so close to the title. If they win, they've just both knocked off top contenders, but then what do you do next? Like Damon mentioned, neither one of them are going to get a title rematch. The reason why I wanted to see Esparza versus Andrade is because Carla, to be honest, hasn't looked that great, and I think Andrade has a really, really good chance of beating her. But like you mentioned, nothing's obviously confirmed in MMA, and if she does lose, then she's sort of derailed. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, it's interesting because we also have Tisha Torres and Rose Namajunas in the mix as well. And then who knows what's going to happen to Paige Van Zandt if she wins her next fight. So yeah, it's interesting. I'll tell you what, guys, this is a good problem to have in the division. I mean, this is a division where a lot of people didn't know what was going to happen next and thought there wasn't much option. But all of a sudden, it seems like there's quite a few names in the mix. So very interesting to see what happens there. Let's quickly jump to the main event, though. Ryan Bader versus Little Nog. Now, for people who didn't realize, Ryan Bader chose not to renew his UFC contract before going into this fight and sort of taken a page out of a lot of other fighters' books who have checked out the free market and really tested out what they can get out of it. In this fight, it was a pretty clear domination to Ryan Bader, who, after a little bit of a hiccup, really dominated Little Nog, took him down and beat him up pretty handily. Damon, what were your takeaways from Ryan's performance in this rematch with Little Nog? I mean, most of the fight, he looked very much on point and pretty good.
pretty much what I expected. I mean, listen, Ryan Bader, this guy, it's so crazy how little respect this guy gets. It kind of drives me nuts how people just kind of treat him as a second-class citizen in this division. And listen, yes, Ryan Bader has come up short, in a number of his big fights. He came up short against Anthony Johnson. He came up short against John Jones. Yes, he's had some tough losses, but to sit here and say the guy's not a top 5 light heavyweight is crazy. And, he went out there and mauled, Rogerio Nogueira, pretty much what I expected to happen. Now, listen, Rogerio Nogueira, we can't deny the fact the guy's past his prime. I mean, he's 40 years old. He's slower. He's taken way too much punishment. But Ryan Bader went out there and did exactly what he was supposed to do. He went out there and just absolutely pummeled the guy. That's what you're supposed to do when you're a heavy favorite over a guy who probably shouldn't be fighting right now. So Ryan Bader went out there and did exactly what he needed to do. His ground and pound was nasty. I mean, he was landing some bombs on Nogueira. And yes, again, you can say maybe Nogueira just didn't have any kind of defense for that, but I still got to give credit to Ryan Bader for landing those shots. He almost landed a rear naked choke in the second round against Nogueira, and then he puts him out in the third. Listen, Ryan Bader may never be the guy. He may never be the guy to beat a John Jones. He may never be the guy to beat a Daniel Cormier, but you can't deny the fact that the guy is a top 5 light heavyweight in a very shallow division. And listen, there's still matchups out there for him. We have not seen him fight Gustafsson. We have not seen him fight Jimmy Manuwa. There are still fun. I would like to see the rematch with Glover Teixeira at some point because Ryan was winning that fight, and then he got a little crazy and overzealous and got caught and finished. So there's still matchups for Ryan Bader, and I hate the fact that people are so hard on this guy, considering the record and the way he's continued to put up big wins in the UFC.
Yeah, no, so, I mean, a lot of people really down on him, but he's a super skilled fighter, and I guess, Casper, a lot of people are wondering what's next for him. I mean, he has a win over Phil Davis, who's the champion over in Bellator, and nothing's really signed yet. Where does Ryan Bader go, and who should he fight next, wherever he does go?
I'm not sure about who he should fight next, but as far as where he goes, I can definitely see an argument for why he would go to Bellator. It kind of seems like the guys who go to Bellator are the ones who maybe aren't guaranteed to, or maybe don't believe that they could be a champion in the UFC. And my understanding of the contracts in the UFC is that if you become a champion, your stock rises significantly and you get a pay rise and you get pay-per-view points and things like that. Whereas in Bellator, you sort of get not so much more money up front, not so much more guaranteed, because if you look at the salaries of, say, Phil Davis and a Benson Henderson, they're very similar to what they were getting in the UFC. I think the biggest difference is there's no Reebok in Bellator, and you can be making quite a lot of money with sponsors. And I think for a guy like Bader, who isn't exactly old, but maybe doesn't have a crazy amount of years, he wants to make as much money as possible so that he can retire comfortably, or at least, have a good nest egg for his family. I think if he goes to Bellator, they could definitely treat him like a star. Like you mentioned, he does have the win over Phil Davis. That's an easy matchup right there from a matchmaker's perspective. And who knows, if he beats Phil, he's now champion in another organization, which raises his stock. I will say, though, and this is sort of going off Damon's point, if you look at the UFC's light heavyweight division, Ryan Bader actually has quite a lot of leverage. No, he hasn't ever, fought for the title or been a UFC champion. But if you look at the top guys like DC, Rumble Johnson, Gustafsson, Glover, then you got Bader at rank number 4. Anyone below, there is a sudden drop. You got Manuwa, you got OSP, Shogun. He might not have too many more years left in him. Rashad Evans, same story there, and he's also going down to middleweight. Then you've got Rogerio Nogueira, which again, he beat him very dominantly, and we don't know how much longer he's going to be fighting for. And from there on, you got guys like Nikita Krylov, Corey Anderson, Italy Latifi, Pat Cummins, who, is in a similar boat to some of these other guys. So, John Vellante, Misha Serkinov. So these aren't really named guys, and Ryan Bader, he's very much a cornerstone of the UFC's light heavyweight division. So let's say worst case scenario, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to Ryan Bader, but let's say he ends up as, and I use the dreaded word of gatekeeper. You still need guys like that in the division. I mean, he's main evented fight nights. He's good like that. You can stick him on, the top billing of cards or even a co-main event. He has exciting fights. So I actually think he's got quite a good amount of leverage. And the way he fought like a guy who was fighting to get a bump in his next contract. So I think even though they let Phil Davis go, and you might think, well, Phil was a big name, I think the light heavyweight division now isn't what it was when Phil was let go by the UFC. So I could definitely see him sticking around.
Damon, I mean, if I'm the UFC, I'm giving this guy a huge deal. I mean, I agree with everything that Casper said. You can't afford to let Ryan Bader leave the light heavyweight division in the UFC. You can't afford to let him go to Bellator at the moment because, I mean, if you look at the division over in Bellator, there's a lot of arguments. There's a lot more up-and-coming guys over there than there is in the light heavyweight division in the UFC. So if you're the UFC brass, are you meeting up with Ryan Bader immediately after the fight and offering him a can't miss, can't turn down, cooking with gasoline, ridiculous offer to keep him with the UFC? Or do you think with the new owners playing hardball with a bunch of other fighters, that may not actually happen?
I think you're going to see one of two things here. You know, it's funny because I put out a tweet right after the card saying that, I thought, Bader and Jimmy Manuwa would be a fun fight. And Bader's coach, Aaron Simpson, tweeted back at me and said Bader versus Davis makes more sense. So there you got his coach already kind of, hinting that, Bader and Phil Davis would be the fight. And I think the part of that's posturing, the part of to know that there is a bigger offer out there. Listen, I think you have to wait until December 10th plays out, because if Daniel Cormier goes out there and beats Anthony Johnson, which I think there is a high possibility of that happening, then I think at that point you keep Ryan Bader around because you give Ryan Bader the title shot. He has history with Daniel Cormier. I think arguably he should have gotten the title shot ahead of Gustafsson. I know Gustafsson ended up putting on a war, and it was a great fight with Daniel Cormier, but Ryan Bader deserved it. Gustafsson was coming off a loss. Ryan Bader had like 4 wins in a row. He deserved it, and they kind of screwed him out of that title shot. I know I've always said this: never put the word deserve in your vocabulary if you're an MMA fan. But listen, in that situation, Ryan Bader did kind of take one on the chin. If Daniel Cormier beats Anthony Johnson, I think you give Ryan Bader the title shot, and that's the enticement you need to keep him, because that's something he's always wanted. He's never gotten. There's a history with Daniel Cormier. I was at that press conference when they got into it right after the fight. There's history there. Why not? I think you could do it, and you could sell it, and it's still a big fight. John Jones is out until July of next year. You can't have DC or Anthony Johnson sitting around for 7 months waiting for John Jones to come back. And then even then, again, there's no guarantees he's going to fight in July. That's just when he comes off suspension. And that's assuming Nevada doesn't hit him with a longer suspension come December. So too many ifs to surround that. I think you wait till December 10th. You let Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson play out. Now, listen, if Anthony Johnson wins, then you got a whole new set of problems, because obviously it's harder to do the rematch with Bader because he just beat Bader in like a minute, less than a year ago. But if DC wins, then you throw the bank at Bader and you say, here's a lot of money, and you're getting the title shot with Daniel Cormier in, let's say, April of next year, and that is the best way to keep him. I don't think Ryan Bader is going to sign with anyone else in the next 3 weeks. You let that fight play out, and if you're the UFC and you want to keep Ryan Bader, you kind of hope DC wins, because then you can make that fight, and I think that's more than enough enticement to keep Bader in the UFC, because let's be honest, no offense, Phil Davis, beating Daniel Cormier for the UFC light heavyweight title is a lot more prestigious and ultimately means more money in your pocket than beating Phil Davis in Bellator.
For sure. You know what my only knock on Ryan Bader's overall performance tonight was? It's not the fact that he got clipped with a few shots. It's just that afterwards, when he got on the mic and he got interviewed by John Anik, he didn't say anything. He was so subdued, and you can't blame it on the fact that he was, puffed out or gassed out. He was breathing fine. I really wish he would have sold his next fight. I know that it may not be the most realistic thing to start calling out the champion now and things like that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we saw with Kamaru, I mean, he called out Damian Maia, and a lot of people laughed, but it doesn't really matter. The fact is, he's out there, he's hustling, he's trying to set up fights, and this is basically the theme of MMA for a long time now. Quiet mouths don't get fed. Even if you don't get the shot, he should have said something. He should have said something about, I've been down this road for a long time. I've been putting in whatever, my years of work. Where's mine? I want mine. Something, anything. Daniel Cormier, you're taking everything I worked for, motherfucker. Anything. Something to set up the next fight. Even if it doesn't come, the fans will get excited, the fans will start talking, and I feel like in some ways the fans have, I don't want to say leverage over the UFC, but the UFC ultimately, they have to listen to the fans to a certain degree. If there is a demand for a fight or a demand for a fighter, in theory, that will translate later on to money. So the UFC will look at it and go, hey, there's a demand for this fight or this fighter, we'll keep him on. So that's the only thing that I would have liked to see from Bader. More vocal on the mic.
UFC, give me your light heavyweight chicken. Nah, it would have been good, but I guess it didn't happen. Now, guys, let's quickly finish this up with the big news that came out. I mean, we already knew this was happening, but it became official. Fedor signed a multi-fight deal with Bellator, and he'll be fighting Matt Mitrione in Bellator 172, which will be on February 18th in America. It's going to be over in San Jose, California. Damon, your thoughts on this matchup? Because I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, Matt Mitrione, he's a pretty formidable opponent. He's not like one of these weird sort of Japanese cans that Fedor could have been fighting in Ryzen. So I'm pretty excited about this one. What do you think about Matt being his next opponent?
You know, here's the thing. You will not meet a bigger mark for Fedor Emelianenko than me. You know, in Pride, I mean, he was my favorite fighter in Pride. I loved watching the guy. I very rarely have gotten nervous to interview or to meet a fighter in the 14 years I've been covering this sport. Fedor was one of them. So I'm a huge Fedor fan. So I want to make that clear. But listen, Fedor, man, I don't know. After seeing him almost lose to Fabio Maldonado, and that fight probably should have been a draw. I don't think it should have been a win for Fedor, and that was against a legit light heavyweight. I don't know that I like him fighting anybody at heavyweight right now. I mean, Matt Mitrione packs a serious punch. Now, listen, Matt Mitrione is not exactly the most stable heavyweight in the world. I mean, he's taken quite a bit of punishment in his career, and he's gotten he's gotten knocked out numerous times as well. So it's a winnable fight for Fedor. There's no doubt about that. But I just get worried, man, because he eats some serious shots. He stopped taking guys down and out wrestling them. He's now going out there just winging punches, and I don't know. I really just don't want to see Fedor get face planted. I think if he would have, stopped fighting a couple years ago, if he would have retired when he actually retired and been done with fighting, I would have been completely okay with it. Will I watch? Absolutely, I'll watch. Fedor's a legend. It's just like Anderson Silva or Mirko Cro Cop. Certain guys, I don't care what they do, I will always watch them. But there's a certain point which I'm going to be watching with kind of one eye closed, and that's where I'm at with Fedor, where I'm going to watch. And I like Matt Mitrione, man. Great guy, super nice guy. I'll always be a Fedor fan, but I'm going to cringe a little bit watching that because I have a bad feeling somebody's going to get knocked out and it's not going to be pretty.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been watching Fedor fights with one eye closed pretty much since when he began fighting in Strikeforce and lost to Verdum. So every fight killed me a little bit, and now there's nothing left inside me. But Casper, what do you think about this fight? You excited to see Mitrione fight Fedor over in Bellator?
I'm excited, man. This is Fedor's toughest test since 2011, Bigfoot Silva. It's the first time he's fighting in the US since Dan Henderson. Look, man, Mitrione, he can knock anybody out, but he can also be knocked out. I mean, Matt's big, he's strong, he's long, and he's also incredibly athletic. So I think he's a really, really tough test for Fedor. We've said it on the show before. Fedor has nothing else to prove. He's accomplished pretty much everything he's going to accomplish in his career. I mean, if he comes back and, becomes the UFC champion, that's something else. But let's be honest, that is really, 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 really unlikely. And you can pretty much guarantee that's never going to happen. But if he is going to fight, I can definitely understand him taking on cans for large amounts of money, but if he's going to fight, I'd rather see him fighting against, decent level competition, and Matt Mitrione fits that mold. At the same time, we've seen Matt get knocked out. Obviously, Fedor has, I would say Fedor probably has the best technical striking of all of Matt's opponents, and that's, when Fedor really decides to use it to mix things up. He has a huge grappling advantage over Matt Mitrione. I guess the big question is, will he use it? That's the biggest one. If he goes in there and he tries to brawl, I don't see it ending well for Fedor. But if he goes in, here's what I'm hoping for. Here's why I'm excited. I'm hoping that we'll see kind of a rejuvenated Fedor, that he will look at this fight and say, hey, Matt's a really tough test. He's not like some of these other guys that I've been fighting. I really need to bring all my tools back. And hopefully we come in, we see a somewhat vintage-like performance from Fedor. And, even if he doesn't win, at least we can look at it and say, hey, he kind of went back to his old school roots and used everything. So I'm exciting. I think it's a pretty intriguing matchup.
So hold on. Hold on. So what's better here? Are we talking about rejuvenated Fedor, motivated BJ, or C-level King? What's more likely to happen here? I'm just curious.
How about C-level? How about US? No, not US Fedor. US Fedor did terribly. How about Japanese Fedor with that look in his eye and motivated? Not training in Stadioscol. How about that?
What about Matt Mitrione? I mean, how lucky is he? I mean, the decision that he made to go Bellator just paid off. What a great fight for him. A bit of money in the pocket. And if he does beat Fedor, I mean, the next few fights, maybe he can make a bit more money and grow his name. There was also a bit of a sneaky photo that came out, guys. We'll finish off on this. GSP hanging out in the back with Rory McDonald. Obviously, they're training partners and friends, and Rory fights for Bellator. Scott Coker and Fedor. That kind of got me thinking. I mean, they signed Chael Sonnen. They signed Fedor. We don't know what's happening with GSP. This whole contract thing is super confusing. GSP says he's a free agent. A lot of things point to that he is not. But what are the chances Bellator and Scott Coker could somehow complete this crazy run of signing big names with getting GSP over to Bellator and really cooking with gasoline here? What do you think, Damon? Any chance that can happen?
No, I don't think so. For a couple of reasons. One, he's still under UFC contract. As much as he wants to say he's not, he is under UFC contract. Two, I think that I've heard from pretty reliable sources what George St. Pierre was asking to fight at UFC 206, which is what I assume he would be asking to fight coming back regardless. And let's just say Jose Aldo wasn't that far off on his figures where he was saying that GSP wanted $10 million. Bellator may have some money to play with. They don't have $10 million to play with. And even if GSP keeps his sponsors, they're not going to be able to afford to pay GSP what he could make in pay-per-view revenue from the UFC, even on his old contract. Let's not forget also, GSP doesn't run his social accounts. That was a big point of contention when he fought Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz kind of gave him a hard time for that when he said he doesn't even run his social media accounts. This is somebody in George St. Pierre's camp, his manager or his friend or his lawyer, I don't know who, but they're putting out these photos very specifically to kind of spur this on because this is all a big negotiation. They want the UFC to cater to George. They want them to give George the deal he wants. And that's all it is. It's posturing. This is nothing but posturing. George didn't do that. George didn't send that tweet out. George didn't even look at his social media account, so we know he didn't do it. This was all done as a negotiating tactic to get under the UFC's skin and a kind of way to prod them a little bit to say, hey, you better pay this guy because there's somebody else out here who would, even though I'm telling you, I'm not convinced they would because I don't think Scott Coker and the guys at Viacom are going to be willing to pay George St. Pierre $8 to $10 million for a fight that's going to air on free TV.
Yeah, well, way to kill our dreams, Damon. Thanks for that. But in all seriousness, guys, check out Damon Martin on Twitter at Damon Martin. Check out nerdcoremovement.com. It's the place to be where Damon breaks down all the hot topics and pop culture. A lot of stuff going on there. Make sure to check it out. And just like that, we're at the end of our program, guys. Just a quick reminder, next week, we will be at UFC Melbourne, so no proper show, but jump on the YouTube channel and subscribe. Big thank you to our guests this week, Cris Cyborg, Luke Rockhold, and the one and only Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. What a great guy. Apart from that, we'll catch you guys next week. Be good.